Buenos dias and hello. So we're at the global platform for disaster risk reduction, right? So we're here to talk to each other. So what I'll do is we'll play a small game just to start off with. It'll take 1 minute, so don't get scared. It's just so you guys can look at each other in the eye. Everyone's looking at their phones. So everyone stand up. 2 minutes. Dos minutos. So turn to you two, come here. So what we'll do is we'll play a game called Stack and Smash, right? So we do this in community engagement, in development. It's to engage people, get them moving because everyone's sitting around, you know, it gets boring. So you want to take your fists and ma'am, you have no partner. Come play with me. So take your fists, both fists like this. Interlocked with your partner. Like that. Yeah. Yeah, you take up. Okay, like this. So when I say stack, you take the person with the bottom fist, puts it on the top. You stack it, yeah? So stack, and stack, and stack. Okay, and when I say smash, you take the top fist, the person with the top fist, and smashes it down to the bottom, okay? So the person underneath has to move their hand out of the way. Does that make sense? So stack, 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 smash. Okay, again. Two more times. So you got stack, 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 smash. Well done. Please sit down. Okay, so what I did was just, it's called an energizer, and it's a good way to get people moving and talking and looking at each other, because we're at the global platform, we're meant to be talking to each other, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So my talk is on participatory numbers for disaster risk reduction. My name is Tane Amirapu, and I'm from the University of Auckland in New Zealand. Apologies for my New Zealand accent. Sometimes it's not the most easily understood. So if you can't understand anything that I say, just put your hand up and I'll clarify. So in community development, right? We'll talk about disaster risk reduction in a second, but in community development, it's primarily about engaging communities, whatever that word may mean. So for disaster risk reduction, it's about talking about vulnerabilities, it's talking about capacities, and talking about hazards. Now, in order to truly understand these concepts, these terms, these aspects of people's lives, we have to talk to them. We have to engage with them, right? As a result, the way that we engage is often quite qualitative in its approaches. Be it from a researcher's or a practitioner's point of view, the way that we interview or we talk to people it generates qualitative data. Words, narratives, stories, meanings, understandings, right? We all know this. So that comes at quite an odds with a bunch of other stakeholders that don't really care for words, right? So I had a really good, we had a good conversation with Save the Children at a session on Monday, and we were talking about the two worlds between academia and practice. So practice often really relies on evidence-based data, right? Objective verifiable indicators, OVIs, we all know that, right? And it's very hard to generate OVIs through words and meanings, often. So in participation, participation is about engaging communities and talking to them and teasing out their livelihoods and meanings, understandings. That often generates qualitative information. So practitioners don't often use participatory methods as often as they should, simply because it just doesn't generate valid information in terms of data, objective, comparative, measurable information. Stories, you cannot really compare stories on a more institutional level in terms of policy or what have you, practice. But there is a way to do this, and it's called participatory numbers. Segue into it. So participatory numbers is a qualitative approach, a participatory approach that generates quantifiable information. Numbers, right? It'll become clear in a second. So just the quick definition. in participation, we engage with the local people, and we put the power in their hands, and we get them to identify things like their vulnerabilities and their capacities and their hazards. And what the participatory numbers framework allows us to do is put values to these numbers, so people can use them across fields, be it the local field, local level, the government level, the policymakers, the practitioners, and what have you. So in order to generate participatory numbers, you need a set of tools, and that's called quantitative participatory methods, QPMs. So this is the non-exhaustive list. So this is a very small set of examples. And I'll remind you that this is not new in any shape or form. Participatory numbers has been around, participatory approaches has been around for decades. Robert Chambers and all these academics have been talking about it for ages. And NGOs like Save the Children and Oxfam, they've been doing this sort of work. This is not new information. But what is sort of a bit different is relying on the participatory framework and using it to produce numbers, using it to produce hard data, not just soft data. Does that make sense? Okay, so the 3 QPMs that I've just chosen to skim through is the timeline and calendar, proportional piling, and participatory mapping, and they generate these numbers that we'll talk about. So the first one is the timeline. Timeline has been used in disasters and DRR a lot. Disaster timelines is something that we're familiar with, even if at a superficial level. It asks people to talk about what hazards have happened before, what disasters happened before, what they learned, who was affected, what was affected, how do they cope short term, how do they recover long term, right? Very, very simple. But beyond just simply naming the event, it generates more than that. If we start thinking about what numbers it produces, we can look at patterns and trends, the frequency of hazards, right? The frequency of disasters that happen. Not only that, we can look at the resource users too. So off the top of my head, a disaster timeline can allow a person, like at the local level, a farmer to say, I use 10 horses to evacuate 3 times a day for 5 days for 5 years during a flood, right? And that's a number. That's a number and a trend and a pattern. And it sounds so straightforward, but that's the beauty of participatory numbers. It's a very straightforward approach, and the value it's used is quite people don't realize how easy it is to obtain these numbers and how useful these numbers can be employed in a variety of fields and by stakeholders. The second one is proportional piling. Now, proportional piling is a way is this exercise exactly. So so these examples are from La Trinidad in the Philippines. What the people did was they identified in a participatory fashion their hazards, their vulnerabilities, and their capacities. They identified them themselves. I, as a facilitator of the exercise, did nothing. By naming them, we had a list. And then what they did was they took candy, lollies, as we call them in New Zealand, and they put weight to each indicator as important as they saw it, right? So this adds a little bit of depth to just simply a qualitative outcome. It adds a quantitative outcome too, right? And so from the value, we can look at ranking and scoring. So after scoring them, we can rank them. Which values are more important? Which vulnerabilities are most salient to people? Or which capacities are most salient to people? It sounds obvious, but this is a number, and it's useful because it's generated by the people. And numbers can be used at an institutional level, be it like at the policy level. Already 5 minutes? Oh my God. Okay, so we'll go. So spatial analysis is the third one. This is arguably one of the more sexier ones, and it'll be talked to by my colleague Kat down the track. This shows the georeferenced three-dimensional model generated by the people, can show measurement and spatial distances between places and indicators. Each color, it's all color-coded, so it's depending on whether they live in brick houses or wooden houses, or whether women or children living in the houses. And this is a number as well. So, why is it important? We're at the Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction. We all know that a dialogue is really important. We need to find a way to communicate across sectors, be it NGOs, be it academics, be it policymakers, and participatory numbers is a way to communicate. Is a way, because numbers translate across languages, right? Numbers are something that everyone can understand. So this is why participatory numbers is such a useful tool in development and disaster risk reduction, because it applies a numbers-based paradigm to a qualitative approach. So it sort of bridges this gap between policymakers and NGOs and various stakeholders at the local, national, IGO level, and so have you, right? Ultimately, we're here to talk to each other and work for the people. Yeah? So, kia ora. Salamat po, and thank you very much. Oh, if you have any questions, just talk to me. I'm here. I'm very talkative, and that's my email. So just send me an email. Gracias.